What about non-theistic religion? Alister cites my definition my point that a religion without God or gods is like a vertebrate without a backbone. As I go on to say, I'm quite prepared to look at vertebrates without backbones, to look at what might be called former religions. I just need a definition for the sake of argument, and I choose to include the presence of a belief in supernatural agents as key, as core to my definition of a religion. What I'm quite prepared to also to look at what I would in fact submit, that given that definition of a religion, then there are lots of things which call themselves religions today that aren't really religions. Why do they call themselves religions? Well, for one thing, because you can get wonderful tax breaks if you call yourself a religion. Scientology wasn't called a religion at the outset. It's a religion now because it gets a great deal from the government by being a religion. It doesn't have any gods. Many people have, in effect, given up the supernatural agents. They're non-theistic, but they still want to cling to the prestige of calling this a religion. There may be very good reasons for doing that, but let's not kid ourselves. That's not what religions used to be. It's what they have sometimes, for some people, become. If we want to look at the whole panoply, we should look at the religions which still have agent gods, supernatural agent gods, and those that don't. One sees the fossil traces of all that agency in every religion. I think it is the most important uniting feature of all the things we call religions. It's also true that many of those religions have become effectively annihilated. The agency has been draining out of them, and we're now left with what we might call former religions.
I'm not sure where Buddhism fits in there. Buddhism, it seems to me, that's a religion with a long, long history, which has never had supernatural agency. But
I think that's not...
Well, we could have an argument about the practice of Buddhism as opposed to the belief.
Every religion has its Unitarians. It's elite sophisticates who love the themes and don't like the supernatural side, and so they leave it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to work on Buddhism. But anyway, Alister,
I wanted to say how much I appreciate that response, but I do want to respond to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also wondered if you could pick up a particular point that Dan made, which I wanted to have your insight on. Sorry, can you hear me a bit better? There was just one point that I wanted Alister to pick up on, which was this idea Islam is submission, and the idea of surrender, which is very important in the Christian tradition as well, the idea of surrender to the will of God. And I wondered how you would respond to Dan on that issue.
I can't and shouldn't speak for Islam. I'm a Christian, and therefore it would be important to do that. The idea is there in sections of Christianity, in late medieval mysticism, Meister Eckhart, the idea of Gelassenheit. But it's always this idea that there is this belief in God which is seen as the one thing in life that really is worthwhile and may be trusted. And therefore, if you're going to submit yourself to anyone, and we all exist in networks of submission and relationships, that is the way these things work, then the point being made is simply if there's anyone who has who is worth submitting to, it is God. So it's that kind of idea, the recognition that there is something here about this agent and about no other, which might merit you orientating yourself towards that agent in how you behave and indeed how you think.
It seems to me, sorry, can you hear me properly? Can you hear the microphone? Comes and goes. Sorry, I'll speak up, but it just seems to me that this concept of surrender is not just a late medieval mysticism idea. You'll get it in Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life. You get it in all kinds of Christianity, all expressions of Christianity. And it is, I think, probably one of the things that most puts off agnostics, atheists.
Well, let me come back to it then. I mean, it's certainly you find Augustine, for example, talks about the service of God being absolute freedom. But the point that Augustine is trying to make is that we exist in a network of relationships where, whether we like it or not, we are either exploiters or being exploited. And what Augustine is trying to explain, maybe he explains it imperfectly, is that in his view, God is the one who engenders within us a way of acting, a way of living, which actually liberates us from other lesser entanglements. So there's a very strong sense that this is about we all exist in some relationship, dependency, some relationship. We're not totally autonomous. I mean, the Enlightenment vision, I think, is very difficult to sustain. What Augustine is saying is that this is a liberating relationship. But in any relationship, there's got to be some other person you're relating to. And for Augustine, it is by this relationship with God that you bring about the spiritual liberation, which is so important for him.
The trouble with that, I think, is that that same liberation is seen by so many as liberating them from the normal constraints of decency to each other. When to me, one of the most dangerous ideas in religion is the idea that your allegiance to your God liberates you from the sense of common decency towards other human beings who may not share your faith. This has certainly been a major source of the difficulties in perhaps not all typical religion, but when religions go toxic, it is typically because the people have got it into their head that behavior that they would otherwise view as completely abhorrent is justified because they've been liberated from the constraints of society by their faith in their idea.
Well, if I could respond to that, I mean, for me, as someone who's read the history of the 20th century, one of the greatest sadnesses and even one of the greatest paradoxes is that some of the worst excesses were committed by those who believed that the elimination of religion was the best way ahead to securing a better world. I think that the truth of this matter is there is fault on all sides, and I'm certainly very happy to own up to any problems my side has had and work to do something about it, but I think there needs to be honesty all round on this front. Can I go back to the meme, because that is something I would like to talk about.
Briefly, because I think the meme, in a way, is a well-trodden debate, and perhaps there are other areas of this which are more kind of novel. But if you wanted just briefly, and then I've got one last question before we...
In 1 minute, I mean, I studied neo-Darwinism. It's compelling all the way, from Mendel through to the existence of DNA, to its apparent structure, to its clarification of its genetic role. I mean, I am forced by the evidence to say that's the way it is, and that's it. I don't see any evidence for this meme. It's being generalized in terms of ideas, in terms of words. It is so vague as to be undefinable and unrefinable, and therefore I have real problems with it.
Was there anything in the evolution of religion, which there's much more detail in the book than Dan had time for, but the way in which shamanism, divination, ancestor worship, these were the sort of raw materials that got built up into, domesticated, institutionalized religion. Were there any points in that explanation which you found intellectually robust enough?
I would have liked to have seen something else. I would have liked to have seen, for example, looking at the history of one religion and saying, look, at this point we can see this, at this point this, because it's documented. My real concern is that I did not see a robust engagement with history. It seemed to me to be slightly speculative. I would dearly have loved to Professor Dennett have said, right, let's take a single case study, go for it, and really try and explain it, because then it would be much easier to have a discussion. But I fear that I just didn't find the raw material for that kind of engagement I really would have liked.
I think what Dan's trying to do is stimulate precisely those kinds of research.
And I would want to say that the next thing should be a case study so we can check out whether this works or not.
Yeah, it could be a lifetime's work doing every religion, trying to see if it matches up. Okay, I'm sure there's lots of people that want to make comments and questions. If you could be as concise as possible. There's mics on either side of the room, and I will try and catch your eye. They're very bright lights, so forgive me. There's a gentleman right at the back. We'll take 2 or 3 questions at a time. So if the speakers could just make a note of questions to come back to them. The gentleman at the back, and then there was somebody over on this side. There's a gentleman there. Yeah.
My name is Nico Heller. Question really for both speakers, and the same question really. Is it possible to think and to theorize about such a thing as religion from the outside? I mean, can an atheist really, really have an opinion on religion, or would that not be something that could really only be fully understood by having faith?
Okay, the gentleman over there. Is there any more hands? Yeah, there's some in the middle, so perhaps the mic could move over into the middle over there. At the back. Is there a gentleman at the back? Yeah.
My name is John Meakin. Perhaps my question is a little similar, and that is, I'd like to hear whether the two gentlemen here think that science and religion are in any way compatible, because it seems to me that on the one hand we tend to link all religion in a bad category and all science in a good category, whereas I think there is good religion and bad religion, and there is good science and there is definitely not so good science. Are they in any way compatible? And because over the last few weeks and months particularly, we've had a huge amount of raging debate on television, notably with Richard Dawkins, in which the whole situation has been heavily polarised.